we're so much more than we've probably even allowed ourselves to imagine is possible. Allow ourselves to love without fear and forgive without expectation that something's going to come back. We need a savior. We need something outside of us to be the best version of ourselves and to compete in the world. And the answer, Curtis, it's not a verbal answer. The answer is
Hey everybody, I'm really excited because today my guest is Gregg Braden, and we're going to get the chance to do a long-form, in-depth conversation, which I'm really looking forward to. Gregg, it's good to see you again.
Hey, Curtis, my brother, it is an honor, it is a pleasure, and it is a joy to join you today. This is our first time in this format together, but I always enjoy our time together. And the truth is, you don't know what I'm going to say, so that means there's a level of trust when you invite me onto your program, and I'm going to tell you that trust means a lot to me. I appreciate it. So thank you.
Right on. Bring on. Whatever you're going to say, bring it on. You've got a new book out, which is called Pure Human. And I thought I'd love to start with, I'm human. And, my back is kind of going out. I'm losing my hair. Like, there's a lot of people I think feel like, oh, yeah, there's a drag to being human. It seems to me in your book, a lot of the spirit of it is that it's important to be human and to protect humanness. So I guess I'd like to start. Like, what's so great about being human? What's so important
Well,
about it?
let me just back up. You said the book is out. The book is actually is available for pre-sale right now. It will physically be released January 28th. So I don't want to mislead people into thinking they're going to be able to read it today, but it is available for, I think this first print run, joyously, I think it's going to sell out before the book is even released. So that's exciting.
Congrats.
Yeah, the book, it's titled, the full title, Pure Human, The Hidden Truth of Our Divinity, Power, and Destiny. And this book, Curtis, it took me, I did something a little different on this book. I actually took 7 months off, with rare exceptions, such as when I saw you in San Diego, where I had speaking commitments. I took the time off to write this in my home studio. Typically, I write the books on airplanes, airports, hotels. You know how that goes. Because I felt it warranted the depth and the breadth of the book, and the urgency of the message warranted me finding just the right words. And of course, all the research underlying everything. So there are two parallel themes in this book. Number one, there is a concerted effort right now, it's not in our future, to replace our humanness with technology, to replace our biology with computer chips, artificial intelligence, chemicals in the blood, nanosensors in the circulatory system, RFID chips throughout the body, and it goes on and on. And I want to talk about why I feel it's not a good idea. Then the flip side of this is the new science, the new discoveries, and I think this is what you're alluding to, that are telling us, Curtis, we're absolutely not what we've been told. We're so much more than we've ever been led to believe. And we're so much more than we've probably even allowed ourselves to imagine is possible, because we have been so deeply indoctrinated into the belief that carbon-based life in general is flawed, and humans specifically are flawed. This is what's taught to our kids in schools today, that we are a flawed form of life, that we're weak, frail, that we are susceptible to what are called failure modes, and ultimately death, because of our fragility. And because of that, we need a savior. We need something outside of us to be the best version of ourselves and to compete in the world. And that something is being touted as technology. So there are two parallel themes. So the reason I said a sense of urgency, there is an expiration date that is coming up in about 5 years. The organizations, the individuals, the forces, the powers that be have envisioned a world that they would like to have in place by the year 2030. Now, I don't know if it's January of 2030 or June of 2030, but this is the number that's coming up in all the official documents and all the proposals and all the plans. And there are a number of reasons for that. There are converging natural cycles and rhythms happening during that time, and there are human-induced cycles and rhythms. But the bottom line is that the policies are already being written and the laws are already being enacted to change our world in ways that we've never seen. And here's where this book comes in. For the first time, we have the technology available not to just change the world around us, Curtis, but to change the world within us, to replace our humanness with the technologies. Once we give our biology away, uh, we cannot get it back. This isn't something. It's not like a little switch where you say, let's try computer chips in the brain for a year, and if it doesn't work, let's go back to what we used to have.
Mm.
Because the human body, the way we're designed, we morph and adapt to the changes that are introduced into the body. And when we stop using some feature of our biology, those systems begin to atrophy, and eventually they no longer work. The science is very clear on this. I'll just give you a perfect example. When I was in school, well, I was in school back in 1950s, 60s, and 70s. They
Yep.
they were they were teaching us that we were born with a finite number of brain cells, and they still teach this in some schools today. And so that became the leverage when we were in college, for example, not to drink another beer, because every beer you drink, you're going to lose some more brain cells, and you've only got so many to begin with.
Don't
Now we're
headbang at concerts. You lose brain
Yeah,
cells. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, that was the whole thing. But now we know that that's not true. What the new science is showing is that we are creating new brain cells from a part of our brain. It's the hippocampus. We're creating those brain cells until the last breath that we take in this world. But there's a catch, because when the new cells emerge, they must be engaged in a meaningful way within about a week, within about 7 days, or they will atrophy and die because the body feels that they're not needed because they're not being used. That principle applies throughout the body. It applies to the immune system. It applies to circulatory, to reproductive systems, cognitive systems, all of those things. So when we begin replacing our natural biology with these external technologies that become internal technologies, we begin to atrophy our natural abilities. And in one generation, that happens. Epigenetics allow us to pass that down to the next generation. And pretty soon, we are not capable of achieving extraordinary potentials that were given to us as a species 200,000 years ago when we first emerged. This is how you lose a species. So I know I've just covered a lot of ground there, a lot of things that we can talk about, but the point is that we are conditioned, and I'm going to use the word indoctrinated, to believe that we are a flawed form of life and that we need something outside of ourselves to be the best version of ourselves. And the science tells us that simply isn't true. Now, the thinking underlying that, and why that's happening and who's driving those decisions, that's a whole conversation we can have. I don't know how deep we want to go. But you asked me specifically why we should appreciate our humanness. We are a rare and precious, sacred, and extraordinarily powerful form of life, given abilities. And I'm going to use that word as a scientist. I'm going to use that word intentionally because we did appear, and scientists do agree, we appeared on Earth mysteriously about 200,000 years ago. We're not the product of Darwin's theory of evolution. So I want to be really clear. As a geologist, I'm a degreed geologist. I believe in evolution. Seen it in the fossil record when I did my field work. Plants, insects, animals, that theory breaks down when it comes to us. There were a series of mutations that occurred not slowly, gradually over a long period of time, but they occurred quickly, and they occurred in ways that our own science says cannot happen in the natural world. They cannot happen under natural conditions. Chromosome number 2, for example, that gives us the neocortex, our abilities for empathy, sympathy, compassion, self-regulation of the biology. Chromosome 7 that gives us complex speech, and others. So the point is that something happened 200,000 years ago, and we were given these extraordinary abilities, and we're about to give them away to technology before we even know what it means fully to be human. I just wanted to finish that statement.
No, sorry to jump in there, but
Yeah.
when you describe those two functions of the brain, or the clusters of functions there, empathy, speech, a lot of that is what people would say is your humanity. If you say like
Yes.
that, that's what makes you human, is your ability to have those things. Yeah. So you're saying that there's like almost like a miraculous event, that something happened outside the norm that made us into this, to what we are today, and that's precious, and that's worth guarding.
That has given us our potential as humans. So I'm going to introduce a word that some people in our genre have a problem with because it has a lot of baggage that comes with it. So let me say the word. I'll define the word, and I think it's going to help to flesh out this conversation.
Okay, ready.
These are everything that I just shared: empathy, sympathy, compassion, as well as imagination, creativity, the ability to love, the ability to forgive, the ability to heal, the ability to innovate. All of these are expressions of what is called human divinity. The word divinity means different things to different people. A lot of people link it to religion, and I can see why. There are schools of divinity that make that connection. But if you check out the contemporary definition of divinity, it I was surprised when I found this. The definition of divinity is simply the ability to transcend perceived limitations. So the ability to transcend, to become more than, and I love this next part, perceived limitations, the limitations that we place upon ourselves, that we live within, may not even be real. They may be limitations that we have been indoctrinated, conditioned, programmed to accept in terms of what we can and cannot do physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, biologically. So divinity simply is our ability to become more than those limitations. Divinity is what frees us from fear, Curtis, and this is going to be really important because the effort to replace our biology with technology is what is used to deny access to our divinity. When we no longer have the biology, we no longer have access to the emotions, to the forgiveness, to the love, to the ability to heal intentionally, to imagine, to create, to innovate, and to share and communicate. The technology can't do that. So the concerted effort to replace our biology is actually a concerted effort to deny our divinity. And when we deny our divinity, we become lost, lonely, vulnerable to other people's ideas and agendas. And there's no shortage of agendas out there and ideas waiting to sweep in to redefine our world and our lives. So there's a context to what we're talking about here. And I think that context is important. So does that make sense so far, what I'm saying so far?
Yes, it does. And I like talking about human divinity. I know you were saying some people are shocked by this, but this channel we've done based it on the ideas of Emanuel Swedenborg, and he was writing about the divine human, or that the human form is sort of an index of, or blueprint of, what he would call divine order. So I love putting those two together. It's interesting too that it's this like divinity. Getting past perceived limitations, it all seems to have kind of a moral arc to it as well, that everything on the side of this divinity is about love, and it's about compassion, and it's about healing, and when you remove that, it's about fear and antagonism and all that.
Well, let me ask a question, Curtis. You and I have never done this before. How deep you want to go? How deep can we go with this?
There's no limit. Let's give me everything you got.
Well, there's a context, and I think this is where people are really struggling today. Obviously, the world is not the world that's business as usual. Even the deniers that used to say, it's we've always had a world like this, are now saying something very unusual is happening. And once we begin to look at the context and the big picture, the conversation divinity takes on a much deeper and a much greater meaning. So, with your permission, I'd like to have that conversation. You all right
Look,
with that?
please do. Yeah.
Um, there's so many ways to go in this. I'm a scientist. I'm a systems thinker, and systems thinkers like to look at the big picture and then zero in on the nanosecond of our lives to know where we fit into that big picture.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to, and there are a number of ways to go into this. I'm going to go into it through an ancient text. I think most of your viewers, I love that you and I are having this conversation
Yeah.
because it's a very informed audience.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have to start at ground zero. I think most people are familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls, the oldest records of the Old Testament. What they may not know is that they are the oldest records of the Old Testament that were not edited to create the contemporary texts that we see today, which are good texts. But if you compare them to the old documents, they're incomplete. Not bad, not wrong, they're just incomplete. And the scrolls were found. I've studied the scrolls most of my adult life. The scrolls were found the first scrolls were found in 1946, 1947 in a cave in Qumran, near the Dead Sea in Israel, what is now Israel. And there were 11 caves that were originally discovered. Actually, they're still finding fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls. 2023, they found new fragments of the scrolls. They're still finding them. So you can't make this up. There were 11 caves that were excavated, over 4,000 fragments of these scrolls. It's not like they were all intact. But here's the part you can't make up. It was in cave number one, the first cave and the first vase that came out of the first cave and the first scroll that came out of the first vase that was relatively intact, 19 columns. And it is called the War Scroll, WAR, War Scroll. That scroll provides the context for everything that we're talking about today, everything we're seeing happening in the world, and the role of divinity and technology in our lives. Now, interestingly, that scroll, as I said, it was found in 46, right around 46, 47. There was a concerted effort by the Vatican and many political sources to keep the translation from the public, and it was not made public until 1991. And you have to say, I was a member of an organization called BAR, Biblical Archaeology Review, and it was headed up by a man named Herschel Shanks. Herschel Shanks almost single-handedly freed the translations of the scrolls to the public. And it was then that we got to see what was in the first scroll in that first vase. And to make a long scroll very short, what I'm going to say, and I'm going to use the exact words, is that you and I and our world, our time, we are engaged in a battle that has been going on since the first of our time emerged on this planet, according to the text, even before we emerged onto this planet. And the exact language is a battle between the sons of darkness and the sons of light. Now, I was at an event recently, and there was a woman that was very offended because she believed that the feminine was excluded because the sons of darkness and sons of light. Yeah, they weren't dealing with gender issues 2,500 years ago the way that we are now. So anyone listening, I want you to know that male and female are inclusive in sons. It's humankind.
Okay. Yep.
And that language is triggering for some people, but in a more contemporary sense, it is a battle between good and evil. This fundamental battle between good and evil. The purpose of the battle is to deny humankind our divinity, to deny us the ability, remember the definition, to transcend our perceived limitations. So to deny us the ability to love fearlessly, to forgive, to heal, to innovate, to imagine, to create, all of the things that we cherish in our humanness. This was the fundamental purpose of this battle. And it has defined all of human history. It's defined all of the wars, all of the economies. uh, all the disease, everything that has happened. Now, when we talk about good and evil, I was born in northern Missouri. I assume I'm speaking largely to a United States audience.
Good,
Yeah,
good, good percentage. Yep.
in Europe, a lot of people don't know where Missouri is. So Missouri is right in the middle of this big, beautiful country that I
Yeah.
love. I was born in a rural part of northern Missouri. And we used to talk about good and evil, but it was always kind of a joke, Curtis. There was a
Yeah.
joke. There was a little red devil on this shoulder, and he always looked the same. He had pointy, horns and a
Little
pointy tail,
pitchfork.
and
Yeah.
a pitchfork and an angel here. And they were always having this conversation back and forth. And we would joke about it. What I want people to know is that evil is very real. It's not a metaphor, and it is rearing its ugly head for a reason, because we're barreling down a course toward an outcome in the year 2030. And what you're seeing is nations, corporations, individuals, power structures are jockeying for position to be in the best place by the time 2030 rolls around. And to achieve that, they want to remake the world and remake our bodies. Evil has many expressions. There is biological evil, there's technological evil, there is a social evil, psychological evil, emotional evil. And some of it is disguised in our world today. So, what I want to do is create a benchmark for a definition of evil.
Okay.
Evil, we can define evil as anything that denies us the ability to express our divinity. Anything that keeps us from our divinity is a form of evil. And I'm saying that because we are all, between now and the next beginning next year, and for the next 5 years, we are going to be strongly encouraged. We're going to be inundated. We will be indoctrinated with sexy marketing and glittery magazines and video clips, making these things look very appealing to give our bodies away to the technology. We're going to be told we'll live in a safer world, that we will be healthier if we do this, without telling us what it is, the price that we will pay to give our humanness. This is our very humanness that is on the line, because it's through our humanness that we access our divinity. If we're not in a biological body, we cannot access love and forgiveness and compassion, imagination, creativity. We can do other things, but it's these human attributes that are really on the line. So our humanness is on the line, and we're seeing a concerted effort, and we're being told, we're being indoctrinated to believe that our humanness is flawed, that it is subject to these failure modes, and that we can do better than this. So the book is identifying what I'm talking about right now. We're in a fundamental battle between good and evil, the sons of darkness, the sons of light. And I'll just tell you, I don't want to leave you hanging. When you read through the scroll, it's fascinating. It describes a number of battles that will unfold, and some will be won by the sons of darkness, some will be won by the sons of light. The ultimate battle, the last battle, is won by the sons of light, but there's a catch. And the catch is that we win this battle. Actually, we don't win, we triumph. And I want to make that distinction. We triumph in this battle, but we triumph because we have divine intervention that is available to us because we have accepted our divinity. So, in other words, when I was a kid, my mom raised my brother and I as a single mother. My father left, abusive, alcoholic, very dysfunctional family, and I was happy when he left. My mom ended up raising two boys. She didn't know how to do that, and I think she did a good job. And she used to say things like, God helps those who help themselves. And I know we've all heard that before.
Yep.
And I think that is the theme that we're being told in this scroll, is by us being willing to accept our potential, our divine nature, and the responsibility that comes with our divinity, that opens the door for the divine help that allows us to triumph in this ancient battle. And I know this is a very different way of thinking for some people, and the language may not work, but I invite people to look beyond the language and look at the themes, and you look at what's playing out in our world today. And honestly, Curtis, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. You look at what's happening, and if you watch the Grammys, on some of the Grammy performances 2 years ago, it was there was a flat out evil ritual that was portrayed as a musical presentation. Or you look at the opening closing ceremonies of the Olympics that happened this year, 2024. It's crazy. There's the pale horse of death riding down the river. What does that possibly have to do with the best, most beautiful young athletes that the nations can produce coming to share in friendship and love their competition, to demonstrate what our potential is? And from the kinetic evil that we see on the battlefields, and whether it's Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, or whether it's Ukraine, or the 22 other nations that the United States is actively involved in conflict, right? We have troops, boots on the ground in 22 other nations we don't even hear about. Those are kinetic expressions of evil. But the psychological evil is what's so insidious, because that's what's coming through our social media. That is what is indoctrinating our young people to hate their bodies, to hate their countries in some respects. But I'm focusing on the human body, to hate their bodies and to worship the technology, to willingly. Young kids are clamoring. They're saying, "You mean I can have a computer chip in my brain, and I can play Grand Theft Auto and never touch a keyboard and never have to use a cable? Sweet, bring it on." And nobody is telling them what the consequences of that kind of technology are. So they're given no reason to cherish and to protect the gift of their humanness. And that is reflected in some of the culture that we see. So now that we have this benchmark, anything that denies our divinity is a form of evil. Now we can look at the proposals that are coming down the pike between now and the year 2030 to remake the world and to remake our bodies. And we at least have some way, Curtis, of consciously addressing what it is that we're being asked to do, rather than blindly following, or following because we're afraid of what happens if we don't. The one last piece I want to say about this, then we can unpack some of this. When we talk about a battle, the old idea of a battle is forces fighting against forces.
Right.
And that's what keeps us stuck in these ongoing battles that go on. And the battle that I'm talking about, it's a very different kind of battle. We don't want to win because we don't want that kind of engagement. We want to triumph. And the way we triumph in the battle between good and evil, the way the sons of light triumph over the sons of darkness, is not necessarily by direct conflict. I mean, everybody knows sometimes you have to bring out your inner warrior. We all have that. But by living the truth of our divinity, the purpose of the battle is to deny our divinity. When we live our divinity, we have triumphed in the battle. When we allow ourselves to love without fear and forgive without expectation that something's going to come back, to imagine and innovate, and then be able to share. The denial of a human to share ideas with another human is a form of evil. And that is playing out in big time through our social media today and things like that. So we don't want to win, we want to triumph. And I'm encouraged because I'm seeing this happen. Not everyone knows everything that we're talking about. Not everyone uses this language. But I know that people are feeling that there's more to them than they've been led to believe. And they're opening the door to deeper appreciation. And my goal of the book is simply that. I hope the reader walks away, number one, with a deeper appreciation of their humanness, and maybe even a sense of pride I am deeply, deeply proud to be human and the potential of what our humanness allows us to bring to this world and beyond, uh, given to no other form of life. And and I think it all comes down for people that don't want to have this conversation. You don't have to know anything we're talking about. It all comes down to love. And I think the question that we all ask ourselves is simply this: do I love myself enough to accept the deep truth of and the responsibility for what it means to be human in this world at this time? And the answer, Curtis, it's not a verbal answer. The answer is how we live our lives. It's the choices we make every moment in our lives. How do we speak to another person? How do we allow them to address us? What do we choose to nourish our bodies? I mean, those are all expressions of divinity. So I just covered a lot of ground, but I wanted to kind of lay that out and we can tie into it. And I'll stop there now.
Sure. Well, I appreciate getting to hear the background, the big picture, the importance of what is going on. And so thank you for sharing that with me. I like using good and evil as terms. On this channel, I'll do it all the time because I feel like, why wouldn't we want to investigate and try to find out what is really good and what is really evil? So I like you giving a definition as well. As you were going through that, I would say I on this channel I'll use the language of the battle between heaven and hell, which I feel like is maybe similar to Sons of Light and Sons of Darkness. As you're going through it, I was thinking, I want to ask him, well, if there's a battle between good and evil, I would want to be on the side of the good. I mean, you just kind of feel this obligation. I was going to say, how do you do that? But I think you were alluding to it at the end. You gave us some good instructions, and I love anything that's like, okay, there's this big complex framework. In the end, it boils down to be loving, treat people loving. Are there any other, how else can I enlist on the side of the good?
Yeah, we live the best version of ourselves. This is why I think it's important to have this benchmark because otherwise evil is this nebulous concept. But when you can really give it something with teeth, anything that denies our divinity. So the way that we triumph or live to the best of our ability is we live our best life. To the best of our ability, we live our humanness. We live all the things that we talked about without fear. This is where our healing begins. You cannot heal your body, lasting healing, unless we accept. Divinity begins the way we think of ourselves. And unless we think of ourselves as worthy of a life and a body in this world, it's very difficult to heal our bodies. And the science now is showing us why. Every emotion that we have, every thought we create, there's a chemical component in the body, an equivalent. It's called a neuropeptide. And we started this in our mother's womb. Every emotion creates a neuropeptide, and typically those neuropeptides metabolize and they flow through the body because the conversation is complete. Unless we are unable to resolve something in the conversation. When we have trauma, and every one of us has had trauma in our lives, and it's different for everyone. I could tell you about my trauma, Curtis, and you could look at me and say, well, what's the big deal? But then right. You tell me about your trauma, and I would say, Curtis, I mean, that doesn't sound great, but it doesn't sound that bad. It's because of our filters. Yeah. Your filters are different than my filters, but it's the way it's the events of life. But even more than that, it's the way we perceive the events of life. And our filters determine how we perceive those events. So when you're 3 years old and you've got trauma in your life, you don't have the tools that we have today, to be able to manage those. So our bodies compensate for that. Your body says, oh, okay, you don't have the tools for this now. We can't metabolize these neuropeptides, so we're going to store them in your body until you reach a time in your life that you can resolve this fear or this hurt or this loss, whatever that trauma is. And what's really interesting is there's a high correlation between the trauma, the neuropeptide that's created, will often be stored in the glands and the organs and the tissues that we associate with the trauma. Isn't that interesting?
Hmm.
So those neuropeptides that your body will store them there for 10 minutes or 70 years, doesn't care. It will nudge you every once in a while to find resolution to your trauma. And it might come up like a little inflammation in a part of the body, and you put some cream on it, or you take an aspirin, and the body says, well, you didn't get that clue, so now I'm going to create maybe a little rash. And I didn't get that clue, and maybe, and it can cascade from that point. It's the body reminding us. And I've seen this in live events and the techniques that are offered in our programs, other programs, how quickly those neuropeptides, once we metabolize the neuropeptides, then the chemical expression of that trauma is released. When we deny our divinity, that is what keeps us stuck in the trauma. When we deny our divinity, we're stuck in fear. And when we are fearful, change is very difficult. And when we are fearful, the less fearful we are, the less we fear change in the world. And the better we know ourselves, the less we fear our own power. So coming back to divinity, the goal of the darkness, the sons of darkness or evil, is to separate us from our expressions of divinity, from our power. So how do we triumph? We live the best version of ourselves, and everyone has to decide what that is in their own lives. And the beauty is that changes as we feel stronger and more confident, as we go through a dark night of the soul where we lose everything and we discover that we're okay. Even though we've lost everything that we love and cherish, we're okay. And there's a sense of confidence, that kind of strength, that kind of wisdom that comes from that. And those are the things that evil wants to deny from us. Because the more empowered we are, the less vulnerable we are to the ideas and the agendas of other people. So the UN has an agenda. It's called UN SDG 2030, Sustainable Development Goals 2030. It's a very misleading title. They have 17 goals that they want to implement by the year 2030. And this is where the insidious nature of this comes from, because when you look at the surface, these are beautiful goals that I want and you want and everyone wants. So for example, who doesn't want food security? I sure do.
Right.
Who doesn't want to end poverty? Who doesn't want to end disease for children in the world, or adults in the world? We all want that. Now you read the fine print of how they hope to achieve those goals, and it is horrendous. It is a remaking of not only the world around us, but the world within us, bringing us into some kind of a bizarre digital database run by massive AI, where everything on the planet is digitized. All of the giraffes in Africa and the elephants, all the fish in the oceans, all the trees, every tree and every forest has a digital ID. Every human, everything we consume, every place that we go, the things that we search out and explore on the internet, everything is digitized and run by a massive artificial intelligence. And this is called the singularity. Ray Kurzweil released a book earlier this year titled The Singularity. He is a futurist. He's an author, science fiction author. He's also director of artificial intelligence research at Google. And he is telling us where, unless we change our thinking, unless we shift the trajectory, he's saying by the year 2045, this is when this internet of all things, this singularity of all things will be in place. It is very anti-human, and it is only possible if we relinquish our biology and our humanness to become part of this technological monster, whatever it is they're hoping to create. He says by the year 2030, within the next 5 years. When you talk to someone in the grocery store or on the street, you will be speaking to someone that is no longer pure human, that we will be some hybrid, whether it's an RFID chip or chemically altered immune system, whatever it is, that we will no longer be pure human. And the title of my book is Pure Human. Interestingly, I came out with that title before I read his book, and it fit perfectly.
Yeah.
I haven't read his entire book. I'm aware of what his book says. So this is the whole point. This often we have these conversations and they're interesting, but they don't seem to have a lot of relevance to the world around us. And what I want people to know is that it's not that this is a part of our world. This is our world. This conversation is happening behind the scenes. Mainstream media is not reporting it. Some of the tech journals are, but most people don't read very, obscure tech journals. But this is where they want things to go. The flip side, Curtis, is the new discoveries. We haven't even really talked about that so much. The new discoveries are telling us that in many cases we meet and even exceed the capacity through our own natural biology. We meet and exceed the capacity of the technology that they want to replace us with. Perfect example. Two examples. When we look at a computer chip, are they fast and efficient? Absolutely, they're totally fast and efficient. Are they scalable? You can only scale a computer chip until it meets the limits of the physics of the stuff it's made of. So if it's made of silicon, those atoms are at a fixed distance, and the information is only going to move between those atoms at a certain rate, and you'll never be able to exceed that. So the scalability is finite. Now you take a look at a human neuron. How scalable is a human neuron? Well, the answer is we don't know, because every time we push a neuron to what we think is a limit, we do what humans do. We morph and we adapt to that limit to open a new vista, an entirely new frontier of information processing. And we do this again and again and again. And it's true for the whole body, not just for neurons. It's true for DNA. It's true for cell membranes. It's true for consciousness. New states of consciousness have now had to be defined in the textbooks to accommodate the higher states that have been demonstrated, for example, in Tibetan monks. We now have a gamma brain state, and we have a hypergamma brain state, and we have an epsilon brain state that, those weren't in the textbooks even 10 years ago. So we meet and exceed, and the big shift, and I'll just say this, the big shift in these discoveries, we used to put all of the human-based discoveries in biology books because we thought of ourselves as soft, wet, sticky, gooey, mushy, biology stuff.
Yeah.
Here's the shift. Now scientists are beginning to look at the human body from an IT perspective, information technology.
Mm-hmm.
And they've discovered that we create electricity in our cells, that our cells are actually circuits, that we have the equivalent of transistors, resistors, capacitors, that we emit photons of light and receive photons, light. Light is information. So we're emitting and transmitting information, that our DNA actually stores information in a way that is immutable, it is secure, it's transparent. And if that sounds familiar to anybody listening, those are the qualities of blockchain technology that is revolutionizing the decentralized financial and information processing world. The external blockchain technology that's changing our world mimics what we already do in the DNA of our bodies. And it goes on and on and on. So we're not what we've been told. We're more than we've been led to believe. And we're at the precipice of giving our humanness away, Curtis, before we even know fully what it means to be human. And my hope is that through this book, hopefully, it gives people reasons to think of themselves differently, develop a deeper appreciation, and as I said, even a sense of pride for their humanness. And ultimately, the question that we all ask ourselves, do we love ourselves enough to accept the gift and the responsibility that comes with our humanness. And we're going to know the answer to that question in about 5 years. So,
Yeah, and let's hope we get it right. Gregg, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me, to share what you learned and what you're passionate about. What I'm taking away from this is like, be human, bring the qualities of humanity, love, compassion, innovation, creativity, everything that makes you a person. Bring that to the world, love and live, and we can have the sons of light pull this one out.
well, we're worth preserving.
Yeah,
I believe that we're just beginning to understand fully, Curtis, what it means to be human, and we are truly, we have the capacity for darkness, but we are truly a beautiful, benevolent species, unless we're forced to betray our truest nature for survival. And we have the ability to do that as well. So this is a quick conversation, and I really appreciate you trusting me with your community, and I
sure.
appreciate, Curtis, you've become a hub for your community, and I really appreciate, community is so important right now. So thank you for all that you do, and everyone watching, all that you do to be the best version of yourselves and to create the best world possible. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you, Gregg. Everyone, there's a link to the book, Pure Human, the pre-order in the description, so you can check that out. And hope you all go out there and live your best human life. Gregg, thanks again. And I'll talk to you another time.
I look forward to seeing you at our next conference. All right.
See ya.
Take care, Curtis. Thank you. Bye-bye.